Hey leaders, what's up? It's Brad. Wanted to give you a quick tool that maybe you can use in your C groups this week. Last week in our email, we started this discussion about creativity and context and finding the balance and allowing ourselves or allowing our students to bring their creativity, their unique perspective on life into our C groups, to have a platform to express that creativity, while at the same time us being leaders, being adults, being a little more experienced in life and having a bit more knowledge and having something like curriculum in our hands, we can then kind of go layer our context on that creativity. But our students know that our C groups, they're a safe place for them to come and kind of bring some of their creativity, to bring their unique perspective. And I want to give us a tool that represents that a little bit and kind of helps to walk our students and even us through what that may look like. For a lot of our students, we know what time looks like, right? We know what time feels like. In the Bible, we see time, the Greek word for time is chronos. But in the Bible, there's a different word for time, and that's kairos. And the difference between those two is chronos time would be like the time that you would consider when you looked at your watch or you looked at a clock, right? You can't really manage it. All you can do is figure out how you want to spend it, right? You can't manage your time. All you can do is manage your priorities. But kairos is more of like a moment in time, right? This is an event. And the key characteristic of a kairos moment is that it's not neutral in its effect on us, right? It's either positive or negative. So a kairos moment is either positive or negative. And we deal with these as adults, as leaders. We deal with moments in our lives on a daily basis. But you know what? Our students do too. And their moments are unique. Their perspective on their moments are extremely unique. So how do we allow them to bring that unique perspective into our C groups on a weekly basis? Well, there's a cool tool for that, and it's called the learning circle. So we identify kairoses. And a way you can do that is just ask your students, hey, what's something cool you experienced this week? Or what's something unique that you experienced this week? You know, what's something that affected you, that had an effect on your life this week, whether it was at school or with your family, and who knows what they may bring to the table. But once we start identifying some of these kairos moments, and maybe it was, you know, my family and I had a family reunion this weekend and it was a really cool experience, or maybe it was my brother and I were in a car wreck and it was a terrifying experience. I don't know, it could be a variety of things. But once we start to identify some of these kairoses, what we can do is we can take them through this circle. So you identified a kairos, right? We're running along this timeline here, and all of a sudden we have this moment, there's an event. And so we take that through this circle, right? And this circle is split in half. The first side of this circle is going to be more of a time for us to gather information, right? So we'll call this the information side. And in this information side, what we want to do is we just want to gather some information about this kairos moment, this thing it's not neutral, it's positive or negative in its effect on our lives. And so the first thing that we'll do is we'll just make some observations, right? So what was it that happened? What was it that took place? What was this moment this week, whether it was at school or with your family or with your friends? What was that? And then we'll reflect on it. So observe is the first step. Reflect is the second step. And in this reflection, we'll say, you know, how did this make you feel? What was it that was unique? What was this that caused this moment to happen? I mean, what was going on in your heart? What was going on in your brain? And then we'll start this discussion, right? We'll just start talking about this. And this is a great time to get other students involved in the discussion as well. I mean, it may be one student that just says, you know, I'm going to share about this experience I had this weekend, and from that we can begin the discussion and get other students involved and say, anybody else felt like this before? Anybody else had an experience like this before? And all of a sudden you get other students starting to layer their creativity and their unique perspective in with this other student. And so you've got this group discussion that starts to take place, and it takes place in this really organic kind of way. And then from here, as we're observing, as we're reflecting, and as we're discussing, we can layer our context, our knowledge, our experience, maybe even bits and pieces of the curriculum for the week, on top of this kind of creative discussion that is started with our students. But we don't stop here. There's two halves to this circle. There's an information side, and there's also an action side of the circle. And the way that the motion goes through the circle is you start with information, you start kind of unpacking here, But we don't want to just stop at information, right? That's not a stopping point. We've got to do something with the information that we've just learned. So this next phase is kind of this action phase. And from that, from our observations, from our reflections, and from our discussions, we are again, using the creativity of our students, going to come up with some sort of a plan. A great example would be, we did this with some of our freshman guys, and through an observation about a family reunion, they realized that they were too quick to judge folks. So from a plan, what's a plan we can do, what's something we can come up with to make sure that we don't judge people too quickly? What's a plan? What's something we can do? And they immediately launched the discussion into, well, we need to break up some of the cliques in our school. And it went from there. So we start with this plan aspect, right? Then we decide, if we're going to come up with this plan and we're going to do something about this, then we need to make sure we hold each other accountable. We're not just going to talk a good talk. We're also going to do this. And we're going to make sure that when you walk back into the C group next Wednesday or next Sunday, first question we're going to ask you is, did you do anything about what we discussed? All right, so we're going to hold each other accountable. So plan and account. And then the last thing is, we're going to act. We're just going to go ahead and do this. We're going to execute the plan. We're going to make sure we hold each other accountable. And we're going to act. We're going to do something about what we've learned. And what this does is this begins to change our lives' trajectory. Now, if you can imagine a slinky, if you ever take a slinky and stretch it out, that's kind of how this learning circle works, and that's kind of how it's intended to work, is that as we begin to understand that life is just a series of moments and events, and learning through these moments and events, our lives' trajectory begins to change, because as we come back up to the top of the circle after we've observed, reflected, discussed, come up with a plan, held each other accountable, and acted, it's going to change, right? Our life trajectory now is going to be different. This timeline, the way we're running on this timeline is going to be different. So it's going to kind of work like this. And we see this time and time and time again in Scripture. I mean, Jesus said, as he's walking his disciples, there would be times that he would send them out, they would come back, they would spend some time observing, reflecting, discussing, and then sending out again. So I wanted to put this into your hands and see if maybe you could use something like this in your C groups. You don't have to draw this. The students never even have to know that you've got this in your toolbox. But this is, again, it's a great way for them to be able to bring their creativity, their unique perspective to the table, for you to take your experience, your knowledge, your context, layer that onto their creativity, observe their moments, reflect moments, discuss moments in their lives, come up with a plan, hold each other accountable, and act, forever changing the trajectory of our lives. So that's a quick tip, that's a quick tool. Hope you enjoy.